TimerOrganizer Introduction. When I was growing up, there were 3 of us girls, all within a 5-year span, and I was the oldest. So when I found out at the age of 10 that I needed to start sharing a room with my youngest sister, while my middle sister now got to have her own room, I had to ask, what is going on? I was informed that my middle sister was protesting having to share a room with my youngest sister because she was too messy. Still not understanding why this was affecting me, I persisted. And what else? I was then informed that I too was a bit messy, so it made more sense for the 2 messy kids to share a room and the nice and tidy child should have her own room. This has affected me to this day, to really have my entire way of living changed because I was deemed too messy. Not only unfair, I was determined to not let it happen again. Well, maybe I didn't quite learn my lesson back then. I still have my moments of intentional chaos, which I will explain later, but for the most part, I keep everything in my life very organized. I learned quite some time ago there is a stigma associated with one's home, car, and workplace if deemed too messy. There were times in my teens and 20s when I was still a bit disorganized, and I noticed that it affected the way my employees. At age 21, I trained a staff in town and out of town on how to use the new depreciation software and how to properly execute a fixed asset physical inventory. My project planning was very basic back then, but I did my best to make it work. My bosses, making comments about the stacks of paper on my desk and floor, even though I was quite competent, and my boyfriends, with their offhanded comments noting that my car was a mess inside and out, looked at me. The turning point was a congruence of many factors, none less important than deciding to be a better role model for my kids. I had graduated college, and I was finally lucky enough, after 3 months, to land a job in my field of study. Thus, I was kicking off what would be a very long and prosperous career, including owning my own firm for the last 20 years. But nothing tested me more than when I needed to prepare for the CPA exam, which would require a tremendous amount of organizational skills in time and project management to pass. I also decided to quit smoking cold turkey and begin studying for the CPA exam, both on the same day, August 15, 1988, and I have never looked back. Before then, I tried to be organized, but there were so many times when I was not, and I felt frustrated and unhappy with my environment. I felt and heard the judgments of those around me. I could have just said that it didn't matter, and I didn't want to succumb to society's need to be organized, but deep down, I knew I felt so much better when I was organized. So I had to put away my thoughts of rebellion and do what was best for me, knowing that this thought of rebellion for their judgments was only momentary and possibly my own feelings of inadequacy that I needed to deal with anyway. So was being organized necessary? We have seen people with great minds and horrific workspaces, creative minds with hoarding conditions, people who seem to function just fine and contribute to society, yet can't find their car keys if they had to without a lot of fanfare every day. I think it is important to decide before you venture off in your quest for organization what the answer to this question is for you. Besides, who wants to spend a lot of time making a lot of changes and then go back to the way things were, only because you realized you didn't really care about being organized after all? Perhaps there is only one area in your life that you really do want to organize. Perfect. We will discuss how to decipher what is most important to you if you haven't thought about it yet. Before we begin organizing, we will discuss all of the reasons to and not to organize, what to expect, and how to prepare yourself for the process, how to change how you look at things, and how you look at spending your time. Time is probably the most overlooked commodity that needs to be organized. Whether it is a project at work, a paper due for school, or your day-to-day life, so that you reach the goals, yes, we will make goals, that will enrich you for years to come. So if you have preconceived ideas about organizing your entire life and then everything will be perfect, take a deep breath, relax a little, and remember that small but meaningful steps in the direction that will affect you the most is the best strategy. Momentum will take over and you will begin to organize areas that are in need with very little effort and keep them with even less if you focus on those areas that are important to you. But if your goal really is to get completely organized, then make sure when you begin thinking about your list in Chapter 1, do I really need to be organized, to include everything you can think of. The sky's the limit. In Chapter 2, if being organized is so good for me, why is it so hard? We will discuss why it seems harder than it needs to be, and then give you more direction as to what everything may or may not mean for you. From there, we will discuss how to make goals, mini goals, and super mini goals. In Chapter 3, before you start organizing, you will have a plan in place on what and how to get you where you want to be. And then in Chapter 4, go ahead and get started. Let's organize. Not really. We will go over the details of how to do it. Sort of. In Chapter 5, when it all goes backwards, we will address the dark side of organization and the pitfalls that may come your way and what to do about them. The specific areas that you may want to organize will be in Part 2, Organizing, Belongings, Time, and how to use the daily timesheets. You won't have to use them every day, I promise. In Part 3, we will go through specialty areas, organizing electronics, offices, whether at home or not, projects, and travel, and are meant to be a reference guide for the future, since in the present you may not want or need to organize all of these areas. I highly recommend reading all of them even if you don't think that they affect you right now. It is very possible that a nugget of information is only included in a certain chapter, and if you do not at least read through them once, you may miss something that could be applied to your life right now. Let's get started. There is a lot to go over and even more to decipher when it comes to what to start with and where to focus your efforts. As always, enjoy the journey. Sherry Sue Fisher.